analysis that you would be doing, and I've pretty much, I didn't put a discount rate. Have y'all talked about discount rates and what that is?
Yes.
Like how if let's say I'm gonna spend $15,000 to have 3 years of a particular service or particular activity, and I need to discount it because $15,000 today is not equal to $15,000 3 years from now. It's usually estimated at 5%.
Yes.
So I didn't put any discounts in there. I really just wanted to make multiple assumptions. And these assumptions, so we're talking about 1 year of life. So if I have a patient who has metastatic breast cancer, for instance, if I can extend their life by 1 year, we can quantify that. We can quantify that, making an assumption that that's worth $120,000 to a patient. If I say that I can have another year that the patient will have no disease or have no evidence of breast cancer, we're going to quantify that with a cost of $60,000. And then finally, progression-free survival. Progression-free survival is when the patient is already metastatic, but as long as we're treating them with the medication, their disease won't get worse. So we're willing to pay $30,000 for that particular outcome to happen for a whole year. All of these assumptions are going to be paramount when you guys are doing your cost-benefit analysis or your cost-effectiveness analysis, because of course all of these things are related to oncology. So you're going to see benefits from the drugs, but you also need to quantify like what those benefits are going to look like from a monetary standpoint. So the patient will be 65 inches tall, 160 pounds, and it's a female. And that's just important because, of course, you're going to be theoretically calculating doses for the patient or assuming doses are being given, so you need to have those type of specifics when you're getting your analysis ready. And I have it set up to where you would do like a 7 to 10 slide presentation, and in lab, probably at the beginning of the lab, I probably randomly choose like 5 to 10 groups. To present maybe like 5 to 7 minutes to, present their analysis to see if they understood exactly what you were trying to do in reference to estimating these things. And, with pharmacoeconomics, it's actually pretty important when you look at it from a hospital's perspective. So every week, like right now, I'm on call at the hospital, meaning any oncology related issue that happens across the hospital, they're gonna call me, not just in the cancer center, so this is inpatient and outpatient. I frequently get calls that really there's a pharmacoeconomic decision that needs to be made because these are patients that are possibly in an intensive care unit about to die, and they're wanting to know can they use a very expensive medication. So you're really at the point where your recommendation is going to spend maybe $60,000 or $70,000 for a couple of days, and you need to understand clinically is it going to benefit the patient or not. So those are decisions that are made on a monthly basis, on a daily basis by individuals like me or somebody that's in my position, or a director of pharmacy is calling me to ask me these type of questions. So that's what I'm trying to get you guys to quantify how expensive the oncology drugs are versus how much would you really be willing to extend. Because this number, $120,000, it seems like maybe a lot, but then if it changed to your family member, you probably would triple that. So you would increase that by 10 times. And if you could be with your family member for another year, maybe you pay $1 million if you had it. So it just depends. It's all relative because it depends on the individual that we're talking about as far as how much you spend. If it's a patient that you don't know, it's just an individual that you're in charge of taking care of, then they really do start looking at these numbers. But I think if you can't make an objective decision with a family member or somebody that you love as far as how much it is worth extending their life or making their life longer. So what I opted to do is to do one together. So I created like a little skeleton of a PowerPoint presentation, and I have an article that's different than the one y'all have, but very similar in the sense of what maybe the drug that is using, an established benefit that can be quantified and has been proven in a randomized controlled trial. So I've already talked to y'all about breast cancer, right? So did this drug look familiar to y'all? Or I talked about anything similar to this drug? So what do y'all remember about this drug? Or these types of drugs? Anything? Y'all gotta ask me in 2 weeks too. say about it?
Isn't it for like post-treatment?
So this one is only used in the metastatic setting, but the drug that I taught you guys and talked to you guys most about in class is used actually after a patient has had, it's an adjuvant treatment. So it's adjuvant endocrine therapy with abemaciclib. So abemaciclib actually is gonna be one of the ones that's included in one of y'all's projects. So there's a couple groups that are gonna have one of the clinical trials that are focused on abemaciclib. This is ribociclib, and then another one called palbociclib. So all three of them are in the same family, CDK4/6 inhibitors. You're gonna find out, pretty expensive when it comes to the cost of them. And when you start multiplying it out by years, that's why I mentioned that discount factor, because you take these drugs for years at a time. So if I spend, $100,000 this year, then I need to start doing 5% discounts to figure out how much exactly would I be spending the following year, because, I can tell you that, if you made $100,000 in 2010, and then we fast forward to 2023, it's totally different. It's not, it's totally different. It's a totally different animal when you think about the increased price of everything that's been going on in the economy, inflation. So you want to take that into consideration. So, ribociclib. So when I say it's used in a metastatic setting, what does that mean to y'all in reference to how long a patient would be on therapy? How long do you think they would be on? So there's two reasons essentially that you would get off of therapy if you have metastatic disease and you're being treated. What's the first one? So I think I heard a very, very low pitch would say progression. Okay, so progression is the reason why you switch them to something else and why you have to take them off, meaning it doesn't work anymore. The other major reason is usually if they die while on therapy. So they're either gonna die on therapy or they're gonna progress and we're gonna have to give them another therapy. So those are the two reasons. And then you have a much smaller percentage of patients who actually have toxicity, so they can't tolerate the drug. That's much less common when you talk about either the patient passing away while on therapy or having a progression. That's important because we need to think about how the length of time, the length of the treatment. So like some key factors. So we talk about cost, we talk about the length of treatment, we talk about tolerability. Okay, what are some other key factors from a pharmacoeconomic standpoint that we want to look at? Because we're doing a cost benefit analysis. So we're going to pretty much take this whatever outcome or measure, and we're going to try to essentially convert it into dollars to see like how much did it really cost for us to get said benefit. That's why we got to make those assumptions that I talked about.
Time off. Time off.
Well, time off, and I'm going to put that as dosing scheme. Because you need to know like how much you're going to be using per month, and there is a period of time that the patient would be offered medication with this particular dosing scheme. So that's important to get a correct estimate of exactly how much we're going to spend. So one big thing, and you can, because it's not really it's not necessarily a clinical exercise, if you will. We're really just trying to quantify benefits of the drug, and a lot of that information can be found early on in the article. Like I don't have to go extremely deep into talking about like what you need to do when you adjust the dose of the medication. I just need to know the treatment schema, and I need to know the benefits. So we already know like the median progression-free survival. Remember, progression-free survival is one of the outcomes we talked about. We also talked about overall survival being what's quantified as the highest. That's $120,000 that we estimate worth per year, and we increase somebody's individual overall survival. So we're looking at the progression-free survival. You see it's 25.3 months with the ribociclib plus letrozole arm versus 16 months. So we're looking at we want to know the absolute difference. So we'll make another slide looking at progression-free survival. Then we'll So what was our constant on progression-free survival? How much did we say in reference to a year?
5%. 0.5%.
30,000. 30,000. That's like how much we feel a year is worth in reference to progression-free survival. So our absolute difference is what in reference is 23.5 versus 16 months. How much? I said, what's the absolute difference between 23.5 months versus 16 months? 7.5 months. That's the benefit. The absolute benefit is 7.5 months. Mm-hmm.
It should be at 25.3.
25.3, thank you. Now, what's the absolute difference between 25.3 versus 16 months? Is that how many? 9.3? Okay, so, what's another big question that we need answered, that hasn't been answered? We talked about some of the key factors related to pharmacoeconomics and ribociclib. We're missing something very important. So we talk about toxicity. Toxicity is like that third reason why a patient is actually going to be taken off of the therapy. But it's usually at least less than 10% of the total patients that are on the therapy are going to be taken off because of toxicity. If it gets any higher than that, it's actually the tolerability is in question at that point. If patients can really tolerate it, usually you get between that 10 and 20% range, but that's how many patients actually discontinue therapy. Usually you want it to be under 5%. But a big part is the cost. So for ribociclib, you're looking at $374.29 per tablet. Okay, per tablet. Now the dosing scheme is 600 milligrams by mouth daily, 21 days on, 7 days off. That's the dosing scheme. And this is regardless. This is a 200 milligram tablet. So you got a 200 milligram tablet. Every 200 milligram tablet costs $379.29 in reference to the cost that's being passed to the patient. So this is not acquisition cost, but as you know, we're not talking about acquisitions. We're not talking about the hospital impact. We're talking about how this is going to necessarily affect the patient. So the patient is probably going to be the insurance, of course, and that's the foundation support. The patient is going to have, between their insurance and them, is going to have to come up with essentially, 374.29 times 3 per day that they get treatment of this. Okay. And one thing about it, like somebody said, time off. So every month they will get a week off of therapy though. So you need to take that into consideration when you're doing your calculations. So let's continue this progression-free survival slide here.
Economics finished already? John? Economics finished already?
Okay, let's go to daily dosing cost. So you guys tell me how much would it cost per day to dose this patient on therapy?
About
$1,124.
Say again, sir?
$1,124
Okay, any cents?
and
Yeah,
70 cents.
7 cents. Okay. That's the
80.
daily cost. How much it cost?
80.
$23,618.07.
23,000.
618.
How many cents?
70.
70. So, this is for how many tablets?
3 per day.
And this is for how many tablets?
63.
Okay, and what's our annual cost?
$283,424.4.
Say again?
$283,424.4.
You said 0.2, like 20 cents?
0.4.
0.4, like 40 cents, okay. So right now, we're looking at, progression-free survival. We have our daily costs, we have our monthly costs, we have our annual costs, which we then can bring back to our assumptions. So we made some assumptions about progression-free survival. We were saying that we have a $30,000 benefit. In this particular outcome. And it costs annually for this drug we can already tell something's not adding up here. Because what was our total benefit for this drug? Did we even get a year? We got 9.3 months, right? So how much is it costing annually for 1 year of benefit throughout the cycle? In reference to progression-free survival. Now, this is not gonna be intuitive, it's not gonna be straightforward, so we'll see if you can arrive at what you should really be doing here. Well, the first problem here is that we're not actually getting a year worth of progression-free survival. That's the first problem. This drug, we're trying to estimate, we're saying $30,000 is what we would consider it to be worth. But it's costing us $283,000 every year to treat the patient with the drug. On top of it costing us $283,000 to treat the patient with the drug, it's actually not giving us a year worth of progression-free survival. So our ceiling is actually 9.3 months. So you essentially need to look at how much does it cost on average for us to treat a patient for 9.3 months. And that's gonna give us actually our exact cost of really what we can quantify on the benefit. we can't assume that the patient is gonna have any other added benefit outside of 9.3 months, if that's the average or the absolute value on average of the benefit of taking this drug with letrozole versus taking letrozole alone. And that's why, like, when you look at oncology drugs, and you look at, like, especially in the metastatic setting, that cost is never essentially gonna add up appropriately. It's never gonna add up appropriately. You're always gonna be pretty much overshooting what you probably estimate to be truly worth it in reference to the patient, unless, once again, it's your family member or it's somebody that's close to you. Then, if I need to pay $200,000 for my father, my mother, my sister, my brother, if I have that, I'm gonna pay that. But the other problem with this is, like, how many people truly have that much money to pay for their health care? This is just a drug. We're not talking about surgery, we're not talking about visits to the oncologist, we're not talking about imaging, which is extremely expensive, labs, there's a lot of things. So this is only drug costs. We're not even talking about the other indirect costs that are associated with it, or direct costs that are not within the realm of pharmacy. So, you know, this is a microcosm of all of the costs that will be associated. Usually, when they're in this scenario though, the drug costs are usually the highest. So you can see, how do I arrive at how much it costs to do that 9.3 months? What am I trying to do there? Like, how am I calculating that?
23 point. I'll do it average of divided by
Oh,
12 times 9 point this.
So we're just trying to talk about the maximum benefit. The maximum benefit that we can assume is the average absolute difference between the progression-free survival months in the control arm versus the treatment arm. So we can't really look at that 1 year. Let's say if it was 1.5 years, then we're gonna do a totally different calculation. But in this scenario, we didn't get even past we didn't get past that, so we really can't make that assumption. Okay? So 9.3 months, so really what you wanna do is you wanna calculate how much medication would I need to buy to treat a patient for 9.3 months.
okay, together.
So,
$219,000.
that's 219,000?
I got
$63.91.
I got 23,000. I got 23,000.
So this is the way I do it. I'm going to put the calculations here, because you'll have to do this, over the next week. So 9.3 months divided by 12 months, gives you essentially 77. So 77% of what we had to buy annually is what we need to buy to treat this 9.3 months, which comes out to the 219,643.91. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I put a number out there that 30,000 is how much you would pay for 1 year progression-free survival. When it really came to it and you saw actual numbers that are associated with medication, it's gonna cost us 219,000 for this patient to get not even a year's worth of progression-free survival benefit when taking this therapy. Okay? So we still got overall survival to do as well, but you kind of understand where we're going with this? Because there's a question, so what's the question that we asked after we did the analysis? Why are we doing the analysis? Well, so the insurance companies versus the drug companies, two totally different entities, and sometimes work together and sometimes work completely against each other, are the most important entities to get the patient treated appropriately. So a drug like this, where you have multiple drugs that are in the same class, if you don't have a unique benefit from a clinical perspective, you as the insurance company are gonna choose drug A versus drug B to put on your formulary for these types of reasons. So this type of analysis I'm doing, if I worked at a managed care institution, I worked at an insurance company, I would do things like this with new drugs. To either get them on the formulary or actually say that I don't want them on the formulary. This drug is more expensive and has no unique clinical qualities compared to a drug that's cheaper. So all of you guys, I know I was asking this question about who worked in pharmacy and nobody ever raised their hand in the class. But at the end of the day, when you do at least your community pharmacy rotation, you're gonna have some prior authorizations that come up, or some drug not covered altogether that come up. And those drug not covered altogether that come up, somebody has done an analysis like this, and there's some alternative that's available that's in this drug's place that is covered, and this one is not covered for things like this. Like they made an assumption, 60,000, 90,000, and then when you do the calculations for the actual drug, you see that you're probably only you're gonna have to spend over $200,000, not even get a year's worth of benefit from the drug. So we're gonna take that drug off of the formulary. I chose ribociclib to talk about in class today because it was uniquely placed off of the formularies of majority of insurance companies. I use these drugs very frequently in my clinical practice. So a year ago, this drug was not on anybody's formulary. Like I couldn't even get this drug covered sometimes for patients. They forced us to use either abemaciclib, which I talked to you guys about in class, or palbociclib, which is Ibrance. That's the first drug of its class to be released in this fashion. So now this drug has the preferred benefit over all of the drugs in the class because now it's shown to have overall survival benefit compared to the other drugs that are in the class. So it went from being non-formulary to it'll eventually become the preferred agent because why? It has a clinical characteristic that's different than the others. And that's how the money comes into play. So it doesn't matter that this one might be more expensive, but you guys will be able to compare when y'all see abemaciclib and palbociclib. They're not very different in reference to their pricing. So what we say for a month on this one? Well, actually I take that back, this one's still more expensive. So this one is a little bit more, it's still more expensive than the others, but the bottom line is even though it's more expensive, it's now got a clinical benefit that trumps the others. It is shown clinically in randomized controlled trials to work better in reference to benefiting patients in their overall survival. So now you have to pretty much respect it, if you will, and you have to put it on the formulary, unless you want to be sued by the patient, which that can happen too. The insurance companies, I do have patients that have lawsuits pending against insurance companies that have not covered their family members' medication or not wanted to cover their family members' medication. And maybe either the family member passed away or since passed away. And now I'm getting calls or getting requests for medical information about that patient because the patient's family, like the insurance company, contributed to the patient's death by not wanting to let us give them the medication that we wanted to give them as far as the clinical team was concerned. So a lot of different aspects and a lot of different things go on when you're looking at the analysis. So
is there a unique circumstance? Okay, insurance doesn't approve, but the prescriber is able to go around and work with the drug company to help get it for the patient?
There are scenarios, or frequent scenarios, where I'm going to the drug company directly after the insurance company has shot me down 3 or 4 times to see if the drug company, the manufacturer, will provide the drug with compassionate use. So a lot of drug companies will allot millions and millions of dollars from their foundation to pay for these drugs for the patients when they will not be covered by the insurance. The problem with that is, let's say I put $10 million in that account. This drug costs $283,000 a year per patient. So there's currently, over 290,000 cases of breast cancer that are diagnosed every year. 70% of those patients have the type of breast cancer that this can possibly benefit them. And you have to bring the number down because not all those patients are metastatic, and this drug is used in the metastatic setting. But you're talking about tens of thousands of women annually that will qualify for this drug every year they'll qualify for this drug. So now we need to do that over 10 years. So now you're talking about hundreds of thousands of women. So I say all that to say that the millions of dollars the company tries to put away, it doesn't impact enough patients. So it impacts some, but not a lot. Not as many as probably needed. The insurance company is, if the insurance company isn't picking up the slack, it's gonna be a problem. Cause you got 100,000 people with blue cross blue shield. Blue cross blue shield don't pick it up, you got a problem. The drug company can't overcome that. Okay. So with our assumption that I said we made, what would y'all's conclusion be in reference to progression-free survival? Because we haven't gotten to the other endpoint. We're gonna do the same thing with the other endpoint. So they're gonna say recommend add to the formula. What y'all gonna say? Y'all got 30,000.
No, it's not cost beneficial.
You recommend not to add the formula, okay?
What about with the unique benefit though?
They still not run other
If they're not gonna live past the
other
9
drugs
for the
can also
year?
do the same thing.
And that's just not looking at,
Just too much going.
Okay.
Just too much.
Yes, ma'am.
Wouldn't you have to compare this like another drug that you would, to really see the benefit if it was worth it?
So to make the conclusion about it being on the formulary or not being on the formulary, you can't not put it on the formulary and not have an alternative that can be used in its place. So what would be probably the most appropriate thing to do is like you want a further comparison of other.
Skip the right comparison. Skip the.
At this point. But see, that's why I gave you some of that clinical information about this drug specifically that's unique. Because now, when you compare this drug to those other drugs in the class, we're not comparing apples to apples anymore. Because this drug has more clinically positive data compared to the other drugs in the class. So it's not apples to apples. This drug is really the only drug that has some of the things it has as far as overall survival benefit. So even though these costs are not in tune with what we would want to pay, we have to put this drug on formulary because of its clinical benefits at this point. Or we have to risk a patient being knowledgeable and getting enough information from their clinical team for them to understand that their insurance company is stopping them from using the most beneficial drug. So then maybe you save however much money you save per patient that doesn't use this drug, but once you get sued a few times and you have to pay some $1 million lawsuits, then you lost all the money you saved at the insurance company by not putting the drug on formulary. Okay, so I'm gonna let y'all kind of lead the charge on this overall survival, not if we get progression-free survival. I think y'all understand what we're doing. Okay. Actually, I'm gonna copy this one. So we stay the same. Okay, y'all help me fill in the blank. Y'all know where to get this from?
No.
An article. So looking at our article, let's see if we have any overall survival rate. But we may not have it. But this one has any time. And we only got progression-free survival. You know.
What does the ORR mean?
Objective response rate. So the ORR, objective response rate, is it's just looking at like trying to quantify how well the medication shrinks the size of the tumor or keeps it stable from where it started. So it's a measure that we don't really hold, it doesn't hold a lot of weight. As far as we're concerned, we want to know progression-free survival and overall survival. Those are the two major things. Okay. So here's the Kaplan-Meier curve that's actually looking at overall survival. Okay. So in this scenario, the overall survival for patients who are being treated with just a placebo is 33 months, and NR means not reached. That means there's too many people that are still alive essentially in the control arm to be able to make a conclusion on this particular endpoint. This is since like this endpoint has since been reported on to show that it is statistically significant, and that's what I was talking about in reference to like this drug having something the other ones don't have. This overall survival is now confirmed to be better with ribociclib plus letrozole versus letrozole alone. But you don't have an actual number you can compare it to at this point from this data. So if we look at overall survival, we have to conclude that even though it's 33 months, we do know that it is longer than 33 months. So that part we do know. But it's not reached at this point in reference to the treatment arm. What do we say in reference to the amount that we would spend for 1 year benefit of overall survival? 120,000. And we know what this is the same as what we already had. Continue there.
Is the 120 coming from the assignment? Because I don't know where.
Correct. One thing is coming from the side. You have to make those assumptions to really be able to make your comparison to possibly make your conclusion.
Question,
Go ahead.
but we don't use the 30,000 for the progression for survival in this one?
We used it before.
No,
You said we don't use the
the
30,000?
30,000 for the PFS.
Well, this now that we're at OS, we put more weight in the lengthening of the individual's life versus lengthening the time that the disease doesn't get worse. So that's why we're using the 120 in the overall survival. Yeah, it's just like it's a variable. This particular endpoint holds more weight than progression-free survival. Overall survival holds more weight. that I went ahead and completed some of the information on here is because it's not reached. We know for a fact it's gonna be longer than 33 months. Because there's equal amounts of patients essentially in each group. So the minimum is gonna have at least a 33-month benefit in reference to overall survival. It's actually longer than that, but we know it's 33 months. So at this time, we can't make a conclusion on how much better it is, but we can assess financially how much does it cost to treat a patient for 33 months, which is is the only information from this trial we have available. So I don't want you to go looking for any additional information. Whatever the primary article I gave you was, quantify what's on that article clinically and economically. That's all you have to do. So how much did it cost to treat a patient for 33 months with ribociclib? Somebody said 700.
779.
So it should be 91.7% of 91% of 3 years of 283,000. So what did you say it was?
779,417.1.
You said point what?
Point one.
Point one. Now finally, if we know that 120,000 times 3, of course, is like 360,000.
That's what I got.
Okay, and we're going a little bit lower than that at 91% of that, so 360. So right now, we know at least just the 33 months of benefit. This is 33 months of overall survival benefit. That's the only thing we can quantify because we know that at a point the end point of the control arm stopped at 33. So we know we're above 33. We know we're above 33 in reference to how many months the patient is going to live. We don't know what the benefit is going to be. I'm wanting this 120,000 to give me a year worth of benefit. So at minimum, I'm wanting to pay $120,000 to get 1 year benefit, which means that I at least need to go to, at 33, I need to go to 45 months of overall survival to get 120,000 of benefit. But you see that I'm spending over 400,000 just to get to that point. Does that make sense? Because it cost me $779,000 just to treat them for 33 months. I need to go another year to theoretically get $120,000 benefit. The patient is only on letrozole. They're not spending any of this $800,000, and they're getting 33 months of overall survival.
Oh, is that the letrozole, the 330,000?
Now, the 330,000. The 330,000 is essentially the 1 point is 91% of 3 years at that cost of 120,000. So this is our theoretic, our cap if we're going on our assumptions. We need to spend $330,000 to get a total of 33 months of benefit total. That's how much we wanna spend, but we're having to spend $779,000. And that's assuming that we're gonna get 3 years of benefit, which we're not. It didn't benefit patients by extending their life by 3 years. So what's y'all conclusion at this point?
Put it on the-
Further study or no to formulary addition?
You can add it to the formula.
Study because you don't know the number of months you're getting benefits, so it could potentially be a lot higher than 30 months.
There's a chance. So, we'll end with this one.
It still didn't get put
What's
on the
your
formulary,
threshold?
did it?
Hmm?
Even if you did further study, it still didn't get put on the formulary, did it? We're just still studying to see.
No, it's not getting put on the formulary.
So in which case we can add it to the formula, can we give like a concrete example? Like,
When will we add it to the formulary?
yes,
Well, so in the scenario, there's 3 drugs in this class. This is one, the other 2 are actually part of y'all's assignment. Taking all 3 of those together and looking at the cost, you can quantify exactly how much it costs to get certain benefits. And that's why this analysis is important. You know, we're looking at, I'm able to really see, especially with the progression-free survival, exactly how much I need to spend to get a certain amount of benefit from a month's perspective. So I would take all 3 of those, and if you had 3 drugs that are in the same class, you have to have one of them on formulary. You have to have one, a lot of times you'll have one that's a preferred, and one that it requires additional criteria to be met for it to be approved. But you pretty much just look for which one was the cheapest out of those in reference to benefit and cost. So if I do the same analysis for abemaciclib, if I do the same analysis for palbociclib, maybe one comes out at 180,000, one comes out as 200,000, one comes out as 220,000. I put the 180,000 drug on formulary. I put the 200,000 drug as on formulary with restrictions, and I would not put the 219,000 drug on formulary. And that's exactly what is happening in real life with this drug. This exact analysis, this is what, if I go to certain insurance companies, this drug is not on formulary because when this analysis like this was done a year ago before that data was available, because that data just became available in December of 2022, this drug was not on formulary. Because if you look at the cost and you compare it to the others with the benefit, this one comes out higher. So then they're all the same to the insurance company. They're not oncology specialists. They're just looking at dollar amounts and how much it costs. And so this is the most expensive.
So cost is more important for benefit than you want to compare to the same things.
Yeah, when you compare drugs in the same class, the first thing they're gonna do is calculate annual cost for a patient being on drug X. If there's no compelling data to say the drug X is better than drug Y, then they're gonna put drug X on formulary if it's the cheaper. So sometimes you have, 8 drugs in the same drug class and 3 of them, they're not covered by the patient's insurance. And the only other thing I'll say, before we kind of shift gears, I'm gonna say this and I'll put this in y'all's, course content so you can refer back to it when y'all are working on your own. But the only other thing is that I did, I did cost benefit analysis. So there, I also assigned some, cost effectiveness analysis for some of the drugs. So what's an appropriate place where you would maybe see that done? What's the biggest assumption that y'all learned about CEA and CEA? You can't do it unless one assumption is complete. Y'all learned about CEA, right?
Yes, cost effective.
Yes, no, usually when we come in, y'all supposed to have learned about that. So when y'all learned about CEA, did y'all not learn that the outcome should be assumed to be the exact same? Now that I said it, I'm not even in this class, man. I took this class like 15 years ago. I ain't studied for a test in pharmacoeconomics in a while.
Yeah, that's true.
So the outcome needs to be the same. So cost effective analysis are very important when you're looking for comparing brands and generics and biosimilars with the parent drug. So in oncology, we don't have a lot of generics, but we have a lot of biosimilars because we have biologic agents. So they don't call them generics, they call them biosimilars. So some groups are assigned to do a CEA against biosimilars, where I have a drug like Herceptin, and I'm comparing it to its biosimilar, which is an example of a biosimilar is Kengenty. They're the same exact drug, I use them the same way, but of course their cost is different. So you get to see exactly how much you would save when you compare it to the parent drug with this biosimilar versus maybe I have another biosimilar that's a slightly different cost, like what is the difference in the cost when you compare it to that biosimilar? So so they're a little bit easier in reference to how you compare them because you're not really looking at progression-free survival or overall survival. That should be the same. They're the same drug. You're looking at how much do you need to use on a month, on a year, annually to treat a patient with the parent drug and a biosimilar. So the CEA analysis are really just looking at you understanding clinically how much you need to use and then comparing costs between the two. Yes.
For the overall survival slide, you mentioned 91.7%. Can you explain that?
Oh, yeah. That 91%, whenever I'm doing these analyses, because I also, when you work at the hospital, usually the clinical team will be responsible for establishing the formulary. So you actually have to sometimes do these cost analyses. So the 91% just comes from the amount of months that I see actually occurring versus like the 3 years. So if you take 33 months and you divide it by 36, then that's where you get the 91 from. Yeah, so that 91 is just like, it's just 91% of that to make it easier when you're dividing it or calculating it into the actual totals. So yeah, it's just a calculator. It's a host of ways you can do this. You can use dimensional analysis also. Yeah, I just like to get the percentage of the months, and then I'll compare that percentage to everything. So I multiply the 91.7% by this times 3. I also multiply the 91.7% times this against this times 3. I did the same thing here. Okay, does anybody have any questions about their assignment? Or any of their responsibilities? You said what?
Can you repeat the assignment?
Oh, the assignment is this. This is y'all assignment. So I got some cost benefit analysis that y'all may need to do on Herceptin versus Herzumera. Also got something with Kadcyla versus Perjeta. got some CEA, analysis of Neulasta versus Dextenzo, CEA with Neupogen versus Naloxone. And I have the Abemaciclib, and Palbociclib, CBA also on there.
Can we do one together?
Yeah, yeah, so I have the groups assigned, so the key is that everyone is gonna have to submit their own. Everyone's gonna have to submit their own, but your topic that's assigned to your group is gonna be all you. If you guys wanna work as a group, you want to work as a group, then you can work as a group. But you individually are responsible for Herceptin versus Herzumra if you're in group 1 or group 3.
So you say groups, is this our lab group?
Yeah, your lab group, or, it's, like I say, it's like, you could be ready, you could work as a group, and you could be in group 1 or group 2, but if you're in group 2, yours should be focused on, the Kadcyla versus the Kangenti with Perjeta, versus if you're in group 1, yours should be focused on Herceptin versus Herzumra. So you could have maybe the same skeleton of your presentation, but the numbers should be different. The comparison should be different because the dosing schema between those two is different in those trials. Go ahead.
If we're doing CEA, how different is that from?
The CEA I just did. So the CEA is gonna be clear. With CEA, it'll be clear which one is gonna be cheaper. You can already see which one is gonna be cheaper. Really, what you're doing with CEA and where it would come into play is there are multiple biosimilars. So the biosimilar cost of Extenzo versus the biosimilar cost of Fulfilla, which is the same drug with different biosimilars, is where you at the hospital will be comparing which one we should add to our formulary. So maybe instead of adding Extenzo, we add Fulfilla because Fulfilla is, 5,500 per dose that's used. Now, and I mean, this is the beginning. It gets more complicated than this, of course, in the real world because there's contracts. So how do you think contracting affects all of these numbers I'm talking to you guys about?
Budget from the facility towards your department?
Yeah, well, with contracting, let's take this for example. Let's do this one for example. So with that's pretty small. So this Neulasta, let's see if they pull it over. But with the Neulasta and the Extenzo, with contracting, there's a possibility that this is the cost of $6,500, but if my hospital buys in a year's time 2,000 doses of this, the drug company will then say, instead of it being costing you $6,500, we're gonna charge you $6,000 per syringe. And if you buy 4,000 over a year's time, we're gonna drop your cost to $5,500. So you'll save $1,000 per injection with contracting if you buy more. And this also doesn't take into consideration 340B pricing. Have y'all talked about 340B pricing? So 340B pricing is like a government entity that essentially causes hospital systems who have ambulatory care clinics, like the cancer center I work in, to get discounted prices across the board on certain medications. So 340B pricing also affects budget and how the CEA and CBA analysis, they aren't as accurate to the dollar amount because of what happens behind closed doors. So this shows you the cost that you can visibly see as a consumer. Yeah, so to answer the question, yeah, you're gonna establish total amounts and total costs associated with it. You'll have endpoints, but you assume that the endpoint is the same, so you really just want to get one to make an assumption of how much you're gonna use over a year's time with the patient's on the medication for a year. And then the comparison or the conclusion can only be made when you're comparing it to another biosimilar on which one you're gonna add to the formula. Okay. Any more questions?
you have to present how or something?
It's the same format, just a PowerPoint presentation, yeah, exactly, yeah. That's why I did this one in class, so you guys know that I'm gonna put this, on Blackboard, so you know exactly what I'm looking for in reference to it. I just want you to, I did this one with you, I want y'all to be able to do it yourself. So, since I happen to be the same person that's gonna be teaching you in the lab just started.